up to the rest of the university. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Marilyn, for that very kind introduction. As Marilyn just said, I'm Justin, and I'm very happy to have all of you here. We have a nice representation from across the university, and some community members, faculty, students. So thank you, everybody, for coming. Please feel free to jump up and get food as it suits you. And I know you hear this a lot for presentations, but if you do have questions at any point, just feel free to raise your hand, speak up, whatever the case might be. We're going to try to make this as organic as possible. And it's sort of a tricky topic. And thank you, everybody, for filling out that short little survey when you registered. But from the survey results, we have a real mixed bag of experience in the group. So we have about 1/3 of the group currently uses Twitter, which is fantastic. That means we have 2/3 that do not use Twitter. So what we're going to try to do today is create sort of a common language, common vocabulary, just a good solid foundation from which we can all continue this conversation after the workshop as well as during the workshop. But we're going to try to make this hands-on and interactive and fun and exciting as possible. So if you're not clear about something, just shoot that hand up and we'll see what we can do to clarify. But before we get too far in, just want to make a quick thank you to the Center for Faculty Excellence in Maryland, wherever she just snuck off to. But they provided the food, which was very excellent. But she also helped me broaden this to people beyond the College of Education, Health, and Human Development. So it's been a nice opportunity to involve more people in the conversation. And then, of course, to uUQRJT, because they are the people who employed me and gave me the opportunity to do fun stuff like this. So, moving along, we have a couple of goals we're going to try to accomplish today. And this may be a bit ambitious for 60 minutes or 50 minutes now, but we're going to try to accomplish these 4 things. We're going to explore new media a little bit. We're going to talk specifically about Twitter. It's just one of a multitude of new media platforms that you can utilize to engage with audiences for academic purposes. The whole, tripartite, package of teaching, research, and outreach. But we're going to talk about Twitter because it's a good entry point for people who are unfamiliar, a little bit familiar with new media, or those people who are using Twitter and other new media platforms that really can help you boost your connection with audiences. Then we're going to do some fun Twittering. And then finally, we're going to talk some specific ideas to utilize these things for research, teaching, and outreach. And to accomplish those goals, we have a nice little agenda, which is phrased in the form of some questions. And we're going to do our best to answer these succinctly, but with some depth and heft as well. So we're going to talk about new media as a general concept, which again helps create that platform, that common vocabulary from which we can all have a discussion, both physically in the room and then digitally, of course, because we'll all be master Twitterers after this. And then we'll talk about why new media is important to you, why is it relevant to you, should you use it professionally? A little sneak peek on that, the answer is yes. And then how ultimately you can use new media to connect with your various different audiences. So, first question, what is new media? This is a whole dissertation topic, a whole seminar topic. You can write long journal articles about this, books about it, but new media comes down to one of the core concepts of what's called the Web 2.0. And 2.0 you usually see when you have software updates or product updates, right? We now have iPhone 6s and we have, version 10.9.2 of the Mac operating system. So we've got all these updates. But what the 2.0, the Web 2.0 refers to is sort of a rejuvenation, a reincarnation of the original Web 1.0, which was just an information exchanger. It was very passive. You would send something from perhaps one office to another office, or one city government to another city government. It started at the federal government level, but it was very passive. It was basically like sending a letter but doing it electronically. So there wasn't any immediacy with it. There wasn't any interactivity with it. So it was just very static, right? So the Web 2.0 built upon that platform and created a more interactive, more connected, more active environment, right? And this is one of the more informative word clouds regarding the Web 2.0. And you can see all sorts of exciting things that pop up on this. And I've circled a few here, but really all of this stuff is important. And, the one that I'm particularly fond of is this notion of the mosaic, right? We've all seen those photos that make a large image out of a bunch of little images. It's sort of pixelated when you look at it really close, but you back up and you can see the whole project, the whole image. And that's what the Web 2.0 strived and continues to strive to accomplish, is this notion of it's a social endeavor, right? It's an active exchange of information. It's a convergence of ideas. It's instantaneous. It allows you to discover things, create things, remix things, so on and so forth. For my particular area of research, I address the notions of teaching and learning utilizing digital media, Web 2.0, active exchange and recreation of information over various geographic spaces, et cetera, but the Web 2.0 allows us as academics, be it if we're teaching focused, research focused, outreach focused, or an extension, whatever the case might be, it allows us to engage in this co-construction of learning and teaching, right? Because we're not only the teacher standing in front of the room, telling their students what they need to know, but we're engaged in the discovery of information concurrently with the students, with other learners, be they physically in the room or abstract and distant from us. But what I think it all really comes down to, if we had to condense all of this fun, exciting stuff into one quick catchphrase, I think discussion and participation really frames it nicely, right? Because communication, discussion, participation involves three things, right? We've all seen the rhetorical triangle. It's this notion of the writer, the producer of the content, you have then the reader or the consumer of the content, and that's happening within a context, right? Within a construct, be it social, geographic, economic, academic, whatever the case might be. So I want you to sort of keep that in the back of your brain and let it float around there a little bit, but the notion behind Web 2.0, behind new media, behind Twitter, is this idea that we're communicating with one another. I'm not just giving you information, you're absorbing it, and we move on and we finish the rest of our day, but you're taking that information, you're absorbing it, you're thinking about it, you may be sharing it with other people, you may be taking it, tweaking it, recreating it. So it's this active process, right? Passive communication is never any fun because you're either talking and someone's pretending to listen, or someone's talking and you're pretending to listen. It really requires at least a two-way street, right? And the cool thing about the web, right? It's a web, so there's a lot of different conversations going on simultaneously. So just some exciting things or important things to keep in mind. So why is new media important? Just alluded to some of that stuff when discussing the word cloud, but there are three key concepts that I want you to keep in mind when thinking about the Web 2.0, when thinking about Twitter, when thinking about your other new media activities. And that's the notion that we're creating, remixing, and sharing content, right? It's an idea that it's an active, ongoing, never-ending conversation, right? You're communicating at all sorts of different levels. So we have creation of content, right? That's very obvious. You're generating, self-generating this stuff. Remixing, right? So you take what someone else has done. You do sort of the Bob Dylan version, right? You take a great song or an obscure song and you make it your own and people love it for what you've done with it, right? So you tweak it in some way. And then sharing. That's really the critical component. You can create stuff, remix stuff all day long, but if you don't spread it and distribute it to other folks, be they research collaborators, if they're students, if they're community members, colleagues, whatever the case might be, you need to make sure you share those things. It doesn't do much good to create things and keep them tucked away in your office. New media extend the point of contact, right? And some of this language comes from social economics, new media economics, this idea that businesses can really leverage new media, right? But it's the same concept for you as academics, as researchers, teachers, collaborators, so on and so forth. You extend your point of contact. So we have this nice, lovely room. We've got 60-ish people registered. Obviously not all 60 attended, but my reach within this room is tiny compared to the number of people who may benefit from this information, right? So new media, Twitter, etc., give me the opportunity to spread that, to extend that point of contact. And then this notion that it's dynamic, interactive, and we're not dealing just with a network, right? We're dealing with a vast network. It's really this almost infinite network of people, places, concepts, organizations that we're dealing with. So again, just let these sort of float in the back of your head and help them frame some of the conversation we're going to have later. And we could talk at great length about why new media is important, but there's this very lovely 3.5-ish minute video, and I think we'll let that do the talking. We never quite know how loud this is going to be, so hopefully it's not too loud to start.
Baba yetu yetu liye mbinguni yetu yetu
goes on and on about the importance of business and so on and so forth, which is certainly critical, but for our purposes, take the notion of brand and think about your own research brand, your own teaching brand, the concepts that you want to convey to students or to collaborators. And really, it's about building your digital brand using social media. And obviously, this is chock full of all sorts of really interesting tidbits. It's a little bit old. It's from early 2011, so some of the statistics have changed. Things have sort of ramped up. Groupon has hit $1 billion in revenue, et cetera, et cetera. But it really conveys some important points. And this notion of how is new media relevant to me, it's sort of a leading question. Obviously, I think it's relevant too, but anything jump out in that video or anything that's been rolling around in your head in terms of why you should maybe care about new media as an academic, as a teacher, researcher, student?
There's only so many people who are going to read your peer-reviewed journal article.
Yeah, if we hadn't focused on one thing, I think that's a good thing to consider. We're going to come back to that in a little bit, but it's this notion, I mean, what's our primary academic product, right? What's our primary academic good that we're selling to our consumers, right? And it's this academic journal, the peer-reviewed journal article, which is still very critical for tenure processes, right? So yeah, when we talk about this vast network, we certainly have a little bit larger readership if we expand beyond the paying subscribers to journals. Yeah. Anything else? Any other key points? Yeah.
I do think my students think that email is passe, even though I email them like twice a week.
Yeah, has anybody ever had trouble getting an email response from a student or a colleague for that matter?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, it's hard because not only are our brains are very busy with other tasks, but our email inboxes are constantly filling up. So it's sort of the Sisyphean task, right, of trying to respond to all the emails. Yeah.
I think it's great to connect to the public and different organizations that I'm working with for my outreach.
Yeah, definitely. And that, we often think, or we're often lambasted, right, for residing in the ivory tower. And hopefully that stereotype is falling apart a little bit. But it's this notion that, yeah, we can reach beyond the walls of academia. We can reach more people than who are just reading our journal articles. Maybe, are not on the right side of that protected paywall for subscribers, so we can get out and we can connect with public audiences, with our community collaborators a bit more easily. Yeah.
Well, there's a youth culture that's developed around new media too, and all of them are students, so we know that some of them feel more comfortable opening up on an online discussion board versus in person, and using the language and knowing like texties and those types of things is helpful to engage students in the process because they think it's funny hearing it come from a professor, but they know what it means and they can relate to it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, critical thinking is critical thinking, right? Creative problem solving is creative problem solving. It's splitting hairs if you're focused on it just happening in the physical classroom or providing students an entry point into the digital sphere where they feel perhaps more comfortable, more at ease. They have all sorts of more information at their fingertips rather than just the the $90 textbook that they often use for a book stop or for a doorstop later in the year. But it also comes down to this notion of your digital representation of your professional you, right? You're creating a brand, you're selling yourself in the most positive sense of that phrase. You are creating content, information, solving problems, and you want to spread that information as far and wide as possible, right? I was in a conversation the other day, and someone had mentioned this notion of PhD work, academic work being very abstract, very theoretical, not rooted in reality, but I have some definite qualms with that. But it's this notion that we are trying to connect with folks who are outside of our office, out of our department, out of our discipline, outside our university, right? Montana's a huge space. Bozeman is one tiny little dot in the southwest corner of that state, right? So if we're doing any type of Montana-based work, we want to have a way to reach some of those folks. And obviously there are issues of access to information and digital connectivity and so on and so forth. But this is certainly a solid start for creating a robust digital brand for yourself, right? And I gave away the answer to this earlier in the presentation, right? But simple answer, yes. More complex answer would address how to use it, why to use it, so on and so forth. And that's what we're going to get to now. All sorts of great, exciting charts that demonstrate the effectiveness of social media for all sorts of endeavors. And this is tiny and fuzzy, and I know the people in the back can't see it, but what it identifies is U.S. internet users who use social networks by age in the percent of each group. So lots of fun statistics, surveys and stuff went into this. The thing I want you to key in on is we've got 18 to 65 plus in these four different lines here. The key to this chart, every one of them is in an upward trajectory. 18-year-olds are typical starting age for university students, all the way up to potential community members that we're dealing with, research collaborators, peer colleagues in this institution or other institutions, community members that you're dealing with. They're all increasing their social media use. And perhaps I should clarify this real quick. New media, social media, you often see those terms interchange, right? And I've been switching back and forth myself unintentionally. Social media is one genre within new media. New media, again, relates to that notion of connectivity, instant discourse, so on and so forth. So social media is the specific type of new media that addresses relationships, communication, so on and so forth. So we can clarify that more later, but just want to make sure I wasn't catching anybody up on that. So they're all increasing, right? So this means that we have a great opportunity to leverage social media and new media in our teaching endeavors, in our research activities, in our outreach projects, right? So this is the big question, right? We're hopefully all now on board. New media, social media have tons of potential, loads of possibility, but how do you connect with your audience or audiences, right? So when we talk about the tripartite 10-year review package, right? We talk about teaching, we talk about research, we talk about service or outreach, right? So we have different audiences for each one of those. Even within our classes, we have different audiences. We have different audiences for our research, right? We have our peer colleagues who are experts in the field. We have non-disciplinary, interested folks. We have people who are public, members of the public who perhaps don't have expertise in our field. So we've got a vast array of people we're trying to connect to. So this is a quick overview of all the options that you have in new media to connect with those various audiences. Now, I don't expect anyone, even Debbie, to be able to understand most of what's going on here. It's a super complex, and this is purposely included here to try to confuse and overwhelm. But what it emphasizes is this idea that there is a vast array of options for you to engage with using new media or social media to connect with those diverse audiences. So we're going to talk about Twitter today, right? Because like I said earlier, it's an easy entry point, and it's also an area that experts, people who have a great deal of experience with new media, or Twitter specifically, can still use it in a more robust way. So it creates a common foundation for us to work from. But if Twitter's not your thing, or if your audience isn't using Twitter, which is a big problem for communication, right? If you're producing stuff, but you don't have an audience to read it, sort of problematic. There are tons of other options, and I'm happy to talk at length about those other options with you one-on-one, small groups, whatever the case might be. But just keep in mind that you're not limited to, just the printed word on paper, right? You're not even limited to English, right? You've got all sorts of language options, you have screen reader options, so you can connect with a diverse audience of readers. So, Twitter, right? This is what we're going to talk about. Little blue bird, if you've seen it, you weren't sure what it was, it's the Twitter icon. But the ultimate question is, what is it good for? Well, a lot. And we're going to try to address some of that, and then we're going to get in and we're going to start tweeting in the next 30 minutes. So, this little image, and you might be able to read it, it's also included in your packet, but this is the full color splendor here, but this is from a great source, PhD Comics. If you're not familiar with it, you should. It will make you both very happy to be done with the dissertation and give you some moments of relief if you're still working on it. But we're going to debunk this myth, right? This is the sort of Twitter as escapism, Twitter as I don't want to be productive, or I've had a rough meeting. So there's all these options of, let's see, outreach that does not involve coming into physical contact with other human beings, right? Clearly not what we're emphasizing here. Gives you something to do during boring seminars. Certainly not what we're advocating here, right? This is the very satirical look at what people think academics are using Twitter for, or people in general using Twitter for. So we're going to debunk this, right? We're going to talk about some productive ways to use Twitter. So Twitter, if you're unfamiliar with it, is this notion that you can connect with audiences in these quick, frequent bursts of burst messages, right? It's this idea that you're not sitting down, writing a term paper, writing a journal article. These are the quick, short bursts of information that you want to connect with your audiences. So you need to keep that in mind, right? We have all sorts of different genres of communication and writing. Twitter is that short, quick, here's some stuff, maybe send people off to look at some other more in-depth stuff, right? But what that allows you to accomplish with this quick, frequent burst of information is all of this fun, exciting, communicative stuff that's in this word cloud, right? This notion that it's instant, notion that it's collaborative, the idea that it's online, it's global, it's innovative, it's a mosaic of information, right? You're taking little bits and you're shooting them out to people and trying to catch those different audiences, those different readers with this information. The mission of Twitter, according to the founders of our Internet's business plan, oops, we want to go back, is that you want to create and share instantly without barriers, right? Some of the same terms that came up in that word cloud. And sometimes we do have a conversation in my field about this notion of digital connectivity, and there's sort of a haves and have-nots in terms of reliable, fast internet service or wireless access, or I have a mobile device, other people don't have mobile devices. So you have certainly an audience that you're not connecting with, right? That we want to be able to connect with. But it truly is, Twitter truly is a global endeavor. This is a map, it's called 1 million tweet map. And this was from yesterday, at some point in the day, I don't remember when. But it shows the last 1 million tweets. They're everywhere, right? This is super cool. This is one of the most exciting things. I mean, granted, we've got a big gap here in Central Africa. Obviously, we can talk more length about that. We've got, obviously, some sparsely inhabited portions of Canada that don't have a lot of tweets. But really, the global distribution of these tweets is fascinating, right? We've got North America, South America, Africa, Asia, Europe, Australia, New Zealand. It's really everywhere. So it's exciting to see that you have obviously you have your core network that you deal with on a daily basis on campus. You've got your disciplinary network. You've got maybe some international colleagues, but you have the potential to make the globe part of your conversation, right? You have the potential to have readers in all four corners of the globe. So exciting, tremendous amounts of potential to think about when we're going through getting Twitter set up. We'll talk about this in a little bit, but to be quick, you have to have 140 characters or less. So that includes your punctuation, includes spacing, all sorts of other fun things. So we'll talk about how to get around some of the character restrictions in a second, but these can't be long, verbose things. You have to err on the short side of your message, but still convey a complex topic, so it's difficult. This down here at the bottom, which I hope everybody can see, this is a critical thing for new Twitter users to keep in mind. This is going on the internet, okay? As we saw on the 1 million tweet map, the internet covers a pretty big geographic space. Any tweets you post, by default, are public, unless you set up your account as a private account where you have to grant permission to viewers. So you need to keep that in mind. Other thing to keep in mind, you can't delete, or you can't edit tweets, you have to delete them. But anything that can pop up on the vast World Wide Web will ultimately be found somewhere. So think before you tweet is always a good little mantra to repeat to yourself. This is the quick 5-point, what do I need to know about Twitter to be proficient immediately, right? So a tweet, that's that quick burst of information you're sending out in 140 characters or less, right? Following, it's like friending someone on Facebook if you're familiar with that language, but you're essentially following their tweets. You're following what's called their Twitter feed, right? So you subscribe, basically, to their Twitter content. Retweeting, that's that remixing concept. You take what someone else has produced, and you say, hey, my audiences are going to benefit from this too, so I'm going to retweet it and send it out to everybody who's following me and subscribing to my tweets. At replies. At replies and direct messages are probably the two things that hang people up the most when they're getting started. Usernames for Twitter always start with the @ sign, right? So my professional Twitter name is @ EHHDLT, right? Education, Health, Human Development, Learning Technologies. If you put the @ sign before someone's username, you create their Twitter username. However, if you start a tweet with that @ sign and the username, it goes directly to that individual, and it's meant to respond to something they've had to say, right? So if you want it to go to a broader network of people, the trick is you just put a little period in front of the @ sign, and voila, you've sort of circumvented the @ reply function. The other thing, direct message. So the @ replies are public, right? Direct messaging is a private Twitter function within Twitter. So it's like sending a Twitter email only to one person, right? So @ replies, public. Even though you're meaning to reply to something someone said, everybody can still see it. Direct message, you're just going to that one individual. So just, again, key to remember, if you think you're sending a direct message and you're just doing an @ reply, you may run into some complications. So, and then there's this little bugger, right? See this everywhere now, all over the place. Newspaper articles, blogs, etc., etc. Anybody have a quick summary of what this is? Quick definition?
What's a hashtag?
That's a hashtag, yes. And what the heck is a hashtag?
It's a way you can bring together similar topics. So, for example, at a conference, there might be a hashtag for that conference that everybody's using, so that you usually search that hashtag and surface everything that we added to it. Some people will use it to express sentiment as
Yeah.
well.
So do we have 2 Twitter users obviously right here? Yeah. So yeah, the hashtag is a way to categorize information, right? You may have noticed it's meant to be very small and faint down here, but there's hashtag navigating new media down here. So that's the hashtag that eventually we're all going to use when we do our practice tweeting here in a little bit. But it's this idea that, yeah, you categorize information. It's a searchable option within Twitter too, which is cool. So if someone tweets and then they include this hashtag navigating new media, it's going to show up blue in your Twitter feed. You click on it and you get to see all the other tweets that included that hashtag. So it's a fun way to find information on Twitter. It's also a useful way for you to categorize information that you yourself are posting to Twitter. And the ultimate sort of key concept of this is it allows you to connect to other conversations focused on that same topic. So the notion of the conference was mentioned, right? You see this in almost every academic conference or professional conference you go to now, is they'll have a hashtag and they'll utilize it to get all that information coming into one searchable area. Faculty members who use it for teaching will often use the course title, right? So whatever your departmental prefix is and then the numbers, right? That's your hashtag. So again, all of your students can find that information quick and accessibly. So hashtags are a critical component of any Twitter activity that you're going to engage in. So we've talked at great length very quickly about some key concepts of new media and Twitter specifically. Now, we're going to play with Twitter. So as you may have noticed on the advertisement for this workshop, this is interactive, so hopefully everybody has some version of a internet-ready device. If you are new to Twitter, getting started is a section you want to begin with. And that begins on page 7 of the handout. If you are already a member of the Twitterverse, you want to look at page 13 of the handout, which is some tips and tricks for going a little bit further for enhancing and enriching your Twitter experience. We'll spend maybe 10-ish, 15 minutes trying to get most people up and running. If you have questions, again, just shoot up your hand or holler if you have anything you want to talk about. But the general idea for the getting started is we're going to get you signed up for Twitter, right? Sounds pretty simple, but there can be some hiccups along the way. So if you have something that's not working quite right for you, just give me a shout and we'll get it smoothed out. After we get you signed up, we're going to help you follow some folks, find some perhaps people who are in your research area or connected to your topic. Friends, family, of course, are always available to be followed as well. We're going to also ask you to follow me, EHHDLT, and then we're going to do some practice tweeting after we get hopefully everybody signed up. If you're already on Twitter and you want to go a little bit further, I've provided some ideas to help make your Twitter activity a little bit more robust. So there's some screenshots on here about creating lists, about saving searches or creating more robust search activity. There's some notions about Twitter apps. I see a lot of folks are using mobile devices, so you already have your apps installed, hopefully. But if you want to talk about more robust apps, we have that option. And then there's a couple of ideas about what we call cross-platform integration. So if you use Twitter, Facebook, or you use Medium and already use Twitter, or if you have a blog and you want to integrate your Twitter, we can talk about how to add those apps or widgets to those platforms. And then finally, I think one of the more fun aspects of having a Twitter account, and useful as well, is what's called Vine, which is a now Twitter-owned application which creates 6-second videos, which are constantly looping while you watch them. You would think 6 seconds is not a lot of time, but it has tremendous, really cool and exciting potential for communicating research in an audio-visual way, or creating really neat student projects to do on particular topics in your coursework. So I'm going to stop rambling now, give you some time to dig in. Like I said, questions, comments, concerns, ideas, anything, just raise a hand, shout out, and we'll address those things. Yes, ma'am.
I've been dying to know how to retweet something, but to add like my own comment within something I want to retweet, and I just can't figure it out.
That's tricky. So that is a feature that comes and goes depending which platform you're using. So it's called quote a tweet. The trick about quoting a tweet is most other tweets are already close to 140 characters, so they don't give you a whole lot of room. So one way to circumvent that is if you reply to the tweet Twitter builds in a nested conversation then. So if you reply to me, right, you want to say, oh, that was great, blah, 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 and, you know, check this out. Twitter will then show on the screen, they'll have the original tweet, and then they'll have a line that's bumped in, just like sort of a standard Harvard outline system. It bumps in and it shows Tricia replied to Justin. Here's what she said. So it creates this nested conversation, sort of like how you'll see emails that have the same subject line. So yeah, the quoting function, you'll see it on, I think on the iPad version of the Twitter app, but you don't see it on the iPhone version or on the desktop version of the Twitter platform. So, but do the reply, because it gives you more space to provide your own content, your own take on things. So raise your hand if you already have a Twitter account. We had about 1/3 of the people respond to the survey. Okay. So those of you who are now setting up Twitter accounts, certainly please holler and ask me if you have questions, but maybe identify people around you who are presently using Twitter. So if you have a question about what button do I click now, or why am I putting this information in there, and that will hopefully help you make this process run a bit more smoothly. But yeah.
Username, this seems like a really hard decision because it seems like that might become.
It's a super critical and important decision, and you know, this handout is designed to get you up and running, but it also has a little caveat on there about username. And the short and sweet of that caveat is you want it to be professional, right? You want it to be in some way informative about who you are, what you do, make you sort of a unique individual rather than, you know, at 725-143, right? It's not real helpful to have a bunch of numbers. You want to make it something memorable and also connect. So yeah, you do want to spend some time thinking about it. However, there is a saving grace. You can change your username. There are disadvantages to that because you want to, again, create that brand. You want people to be familiar with, oh, when they're going to look for information about learning technologies at the College of Education, Health, and Human Development, they know they can rely on EHHDLT to be there, right? So right now, if you're unsure about your username, certainly hold off, think about it, mull it around a little bit. Or if you're really eager to get in with Twitter, you're like, I think this is going to be my username, go ahead and use it. You can always go back and tweak it later through the settings option. We can talk about how to change your profile later. And that's also a good thing to remember for those of you who perhaps have Twitter accounts and you've used them socially, sort of in a personal sense, and you now want to move into sort of the professional sphere of Twitter. So if you want to change your username from sort of I love kittens, or to, you can change it to something more professional and certainly without losing all of your followers or connectivity. On the sort of other side of that coin, it's always okay to have a social, friendly I love kittens account and to have that, I'm a professional researcher, academic, whatever the case might be. So having multiple Twitter accounts certainly has obvious benefits as well. So it sort of depends who are my audiences, what am I trying to communicate, so on and so forth. Yes, sir?
Can one email address have multiple accounts, or do you have to create them with 2 different email addresses?
You should be able to create more than one with that singular email. That said, I haven't tried to do it within the last 30 days, so it may have changed. But prior to, you were able to. If not, there are plenty of ways to create dummy email accounts, which we can talk more about. Yeah. How's everybody doing getting up and rolling with Twitter? Is anybody got it? All right, Deb. Is anybody having complications they want to talk about real quick? Yes, sir.
I'm having trouble with trying to read this word these days.
Oh, the caption.
I got over 8 million days last night.
So, real quick, since we've got most people signed up, I want to talk about a couple of quick things. Yes. Yeah. So we're going to talk about that right now. Yeah. So communicating via new media, and you've got this. All this stuff's going to be posted on my website. So we're going to run through this real quick and answer that question about teaching. Obviously, understand your audience. Utilize these concepts called communicating science that come from University of Stony Brook, Alan Alda Center for Communicating Science, and for the American Association for the advancement of science. But fun, exciting stuff. We'll talk more about that later. But moving along. Okay, now what? And this gets to your question about how does this change my teaching, right? So we're going to quickly in the next 12 minutes address all this stuff. We'll come back to the research component here in 1 second. So teaching and Twitter, right? Obviously, this is going to change your pedagogical dynamic. It's going to change your availability to your students, so on and so forth. It's much in the same way, the way to think about it is much the same that you want to think about email, right? Email is always available, right? You can respond to those emails at 1:30 in the morning if you so choose. However, that creates then that precedent that, hey, I'm awake at 1:30, so if you have a question about the exam that starts at 8, feel free to email me. So you yourself have to determine what your boundaries are, right? Twitter, again, is designed to be that quick, frequent burst of information. It, however, does not require you to respond immediately. It creates really robust, ongoing, dynamic conversations if you do. But as we saw on that 1 million tweets map, there's Twitter activity going on everywhere all the time. There's no way you can possibly keep up with it. So what I encourage faculty members to do when they're teaching, or instructors to do when they're teaching, is you have to create some sort of guidelines for what you want your students to accomplish. It's not merely enough to say, hey, we're going to use Twitter for this course, and then sort of move on to the next thing, right? So we saw in that word cloud that there were notions of the mosaic, collaborativeness, conversation, communication, discussion, participation. Twitter enables all of those things, but you still need to provide that structure, right? So what are the goals we're aiming towards? How are we going to accomplish those goals? And you set up a framework for, I want you to tweet about this sort of thing. Or if something does get you really excited when you're reading the course materials at 2 o'clock in the morning, tweet about it, make sure you use the hashtag, and then you, me, the instructor, whomever, other colleagues, go back and they search that hashtag and they get to see, oh, look, John was tweeting about this got him really excited, and then it certainly provides you the opportunity to respond to it, at 1:30 in the afternoon as opposed to 1:30 in the morning. Does that sort of address the concern question?
Well, I guess I'm asking, does it build up expectations among the student population that you're going to be answering questions any time of the day?
Yes and no. I think it's sort of a mixed bag, and that's, again, part of that framing the conversation. And this is true anytime you introduce any sort of new technology or new concept into a classroom environment, right? Or into a team environment. You need to say, this is what we're hoping to accomplish. Here's how we're planning to use it. And you sort of, again, create that ideological framework about the technology, the tool, the concept, the sort of end goal that you're trying to accomplish. Some students certainly think that email is that instant, hey, I sent that email 5 minutes ago, why haven't you responded? Some are going to send you, Twitter messages and say, well, I sent this to you on Sunday at, 3 o'clock in the morning, and I didn't get a response until Monday at 8 a.m. And it's, well, you have to have that conversation about, availability versus expectation. And again, we saw in that 1 million tweets map is, it's hard to keep up with all the Twitter activity. It's hard to keep up with all the emails. It's hard to keep up with all the journal articles. So we have we're bombarded constantly with information, and creating a workflow, an information flow is a critical part of employing these tools. Yeah?
Do you have an idea what percentage of the MSU students use Twitter?
At MSU, no, I don't. I do know that we may have an answer to that question.
Yeah, I work at the library, we've done a social media survey, and it's opt-in, so it's a little bit not so scientific, but it mirrors the same statistics you had up there. It's about 90% of students use some form of social media.
Cool. And an important thing to remember with that sort of a footnote for that concept is just because they use it doesn't mean they're necessarily going to have those skills to tailor it for academic purposes, for learning purposes, research purposes. So again, that's part of that framing conversation with, hey, we're not just doing this because we have Twitter, we're doing it because we think Twitter can leverage this concept or give us this opportunity. And this, which again is included in your handout and will be posted on the uUQRJT LT website, is, I think, a really quick, bare bones, good look at some ideas to use Twitter in teaching, right? Obviously, this stuff needs to be tailored for your discipline, for your students' Twitter activity, your students' academic level, right? Undergrads versus grad students, upper division versus lower division courses, all those types of things. But it gives you a good starting point to start thinking about things. Think about how you can explore Twitter for those learning purposes, for those teaching, creative, problem-solving, critical thinking type skills. And we skipped over this just a second ago, but research, I think it's really, really awesome to have Twitter, because Tricia brought up this notion of the journal article earlier, and obviously length and exposure and all of those things vary by journal type, discipline, your sort of prestige, all that kind of stuff. But Twitter gives us the opportunity to communicate complex ideas in 140 characters. It sounds like it can't be done, but trust me, it can be done in very exciting ways. And this, again, is in your packet. But this is a quick review of the last 3,200 years of communication. And it's got exciting stuff, cave paintings and the invention of paper, all that kind of stuff. So this little green thing right here, this is the peer-reviewed academic journal. Starts mid-17th century. We've obviously gone through a number of changes, revolutions, if you will, since then. What do we still rely upon for tenure? The peer-reviewed journal article, which is a whole different conversation. But we can see right here we've got Twitter at the very end, right? And it's this idea that quick, short bits of information obviously are not going to convey the complexity of your entire article, but you can provide snippets of ongoing research. You can communicate some key ideas from that article. You include a nice little hyperlink, and what does it do? It directs people over to read the rest of that article. So again, you're creating your research brand, your intellectual brand. So you're trying to drive people from reading your quick 140-character, easily digestible tweet to, here's my more complex design of this research problem, or my the way that I break down this cultural construct in XYZ topic, right? So you're driving people from Twitter to access other content that is a part of your brand, right? And again, we're running a bit. Yes, ma'am.
I was just gonna ask, where do you think Instagram would fit in with this? I know it's just mostly sharing pictures, but do you think it's as robust a form of
So Twitter, you definitely can use images, right? You can use visuals.
Great.
Instagram is a visual first, text second concept. Nice thing about Instagram, it doesn't have a character restriction, so you can be more verbose with the way that you talk about content. Drawback, it's mostly a mobile-only platform, so it's really, you can, of course, get access to stuff on the web, but it's a little bit more difficult to interact with it. So I think, again, it comes down to who's my audience, what type of information am I trying to communicate, and certainly you can use Twitter and Instagram and Vine and Facebook and a blog, and. So having that sort of multitude of platforms is good, but yeah, I think any new media, social media apps that you can use for sort of friendly social purposes, you can find a professional application for as well, depending on discipline, content, audience, all that kind of stuff. So, we go back to freshman English and that rhetorical triangle, right? Understanding who you are as the creator of the information, who's consuming that information, what's the content, and then what sort of context or construct are we operating in. Other questions, real quick? I just want to highlight a couple of other quick things, and we'll talk about some more stuff. So, this is it's more colorful, obviously, up here. It's in the packet in grayscale, but this is this idea of choosing a hashtag, right? How do you choose the right hashtag? Because you're trying to connect with more conversation other than what you're just generating, right? So you have to make some decisions. This is a nice, somewhat funny, jabbing sort of flowchart to get you to think about that. But it ultimately comes down to, how do I best leverage ongoing conversations to further broaden my appeal, broaden my network, spread my audience, right? Make it a diverse collective. So this gives you some good things to think about. And this, I think, ultimately applies when you're thinking about how to structure this for research, or for how to structure this for teaching purposes or outreach purposes. Hashtags, of course, are important, but you sort of go through this flowchart in the mind of, what am I hoping to accomplish? Is Twitter the best platform to do that? What am I going to need to tweak in my current practices to get this communication initiated and ongoing with my particular audiences? So you need to think through these complex topics, obviously, before you jump in. So we're going to do a real quick practice. We've got 3 minutes. We've got plenty of time to do this. So what I want you to do is I want you to tweet. I want you to tweet including my username. You don't have to make it first. It doesn't have to be an @reply. I want you to use the hashtag navigating new media, and I want you to answer one of these questions. All of these questions, if you want to make 4 tweets, that'd be great. But just tweet. And this not only helps you get a little bit of practice, but it also helps emphasize maybe some things that could be done differently in the workshop, gives us the idea of how we can expand it to broader audiences, so on and so forth. So, take a couple of seconds, 140 characters, that username, that hashtag, and let's see what we've got going.
Do the hashtags and usernames count as the?
They do count as characters. Yeah. So you have 117 maybe, characters to use. Yeah.
Did you mention, did the order matter? So do you have to put at EHHALT?
So this has to be in that order. Yeah, you have to put the at sign before the username, otherwise it's just a string of letters.
And then you just hashtag at the end?
So you can put this stuff anywhere in the tweet you want. You just have to make sure that the hashtag is immediately adjacent to the letters. With hashtags, you can't use any characters other than numbers and letters. So if you try to toss like a navigating period new, it's going to end that hashtag at navigating. And again, that'll show up in blue if it's working properly. If not, it won't work. Let's go here and then there.
Do capital letters matter?
They do not matter. No, it's just easier to read when you put the capital letters in.
So this will send specifically to you.
If you put at EHHDLT as the very first thing in the tweet, it's going to go directly to my Twitter feed and not get spread out to all of your followers. If you do not put that as the primary thing in the tweet, it will go to everyone who follows you on Twitter.
So we're going to do period at.
So you can do period at EHHDLT, and that will spread it to everybody. Or you say, you start with the hashtag navigating your media workshop, awesome. Thanks at EHHDLT, right? That's a good way to subvert it, get both of those things.
What is the point of addressing it to you with EHHDLT if it goes to everybody?
So what happens when you include someone's username on a tweet, they get notified if they have notifications set up, or it will always, by default, show up in their Twitter feed because you've included their username. So it's a good way of sort of sending it to everybody while also making particular mention of this one individual, one organization, one business, whatever it is. Other questions, thoughts, concerns, complications? I know this was super fast-paced. We tried to pack a lot of stuff in, but I just want to draw your attention. Well, we've got a lot of activity going already. This is great. Again, all this stuff is going to be up on the website, and there's lots of other Twitter help options. But if you do have questions, my contact info is on the top page of that handout. Please feel free to email me, call me. My office is across the hall from here. So if you have questions, we can do one-on-one meetings to talk more specifically about particular topics. We can set up small group meetings if you want to talk about maybe how to incorporate this into your pedagogy or talk about how to work it into your research flow. Let me know. We can talk about all those things in depth. And then also, just as a little heads up, we're going to try to do a couple of more new media, digital pedagogy, sort of moving into the 21st century or advancing what you're already doing workshops throughout the course of this year. So keep your eyes open and check your Twitter feeds and emails and all that kind of stuff for some upcoming workshops, which will be a little bit more focused than this one, trying to get everybody with that common vocabulary. So any last second questions, comments, concerns? All right. Thank you so much for coming. There's a lot of food left, so grab some food, and I think we've got evaluations that...